All right. Part two, we are going to do a painting with only transparent paints. I'm using basically my split primary palette, but I'm only grabbing the transparent tubes. So I'll be using Indian yellow, quinacridone red, ultramarine blue. I could use manganese blue, but I'm not going to. I'm going to keep it simple. So it's almost like a simplified primary palette, right? Just one of each. And then my guest color today is going to be the transparent earth red. I'm going to make kind of an old timey, kind of a glowy, almost kind of a tonalist painting. Hoping that I'll do it in about 35, 40 minutes, at least get it mostly laid in. I'm going to be using a subtractive painting technique in the beginning, meaning that I'm going to cover the surface with 2 layers of transparent paint, and then I'm going to go through and remove the lightest areas. So let's go try it, see how we do. Great. So we voted and we picked the gesso mixed with a little bit of the fluorescent yellow paint. So it's not quite, again, it's not quite a full, just plain white surface, but not a huge amount of change. But let's just see what happens. That'll be fun.
What color blue are you using?
I'll mix a little bit of acrylic color with my gesso, just to, I can make it a little bit more tan or a little bit more reddish, or sometimes I even mix black acrylic paint with my white gesso to make a gray surface. In fact, I have a whole lot of canvases that I prep to be the same value as my mixing surface. That way I know that when I mix the colors here, they're going to appear the same here. And having a gray panel to paint on when I go out plein air painting is a lot better, as far as I don't go snow blind, right? I'm not staring at a white surface in the bright sunlight. So oftentimes I will prep gray underpaintings. All right, the colors I've squeezed out again: transparent earth red, titanium light, Indian yellow, quinacridone red, ultramarine blue. I'm going to start with a thin wash. Make sure I'm grabbing a clean brush here out of all the brushes I got. I've got a little bit of Gamsol on here, so I'm just put that on there, make it a little bit slicker. I don't want a super slick surface, but I also don't want it to be. I'm gonna grab my Indian yellow. So I probably didn't need my, bright yellow underpainting, because Indian yellow is so bright already. What I'm hoping this is doing is staining that surface a little bit. I'm gonna give that just a minute. What it's doing is, with the gesso is generally a little bit thirsty, which I like, meaning that it's soaking up a little bit of that. So when I come back in and start wiping away, it's going to have stained the surface a little bit. Different gessos have different amounts of thirstiness or absorbency. Some people really like almost like a shellac, like a hard feel, like the paint just skims across and nothing gets absorbed. I like it to be a little bit absorbent. It seems to grab my paint a little better for me. And it's just, after experimentation and playing, it works well for me. Just grabbing a new roll of paper towels. I've gone through the last one. So I feel like that's probably sat in there long enough. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab just a touch of the quinacridone red, and I'm going to grab this earth red is really kind of dried up a little bit. So I'm going to mix it with a little bit of the quinacridone red, maybe a touch of my Indian yellow, mostly just to get it to flow a little better. And I've just made it basically my transparent earth red. I've just basically made it a little bit warmer, a little bit yellower, a little bit redder. Load my brush up with that. Oh, I should probably show you what I'm gonna, my reference, if I can find it. stacks of references. There it is. So there's my photo reference. I did go ahead and paste that onto our page, so you're free to use that if you want to. Just some poplar trees along, and I actually made the pond up. It's not actually in that scene. And this is going to be repainting. I've already painted it once. So I also have my painting as a reference. So here's kind of loosely what I'm hoping it's going to end up looking like a little bit. So I got my Indian yellow sitting on there, soaking in.
Did you cut and paste on Photoshop the pond in there?
Yeah, yeah. I just put, yeah. I did the clone tool and then just reversed it and painted it down ways. So it reflects the sky. I just thought it was too big of a dark space. It needed a little something. In fuego, so hot. My darn elbow. I'm gonna see if I'm gonna move the camera a little more so my elbow doesn't get in there quite as much. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab some of my ultramarine blue and mix it in there as well. And I don't know if all these layering makes that big of a difference that I like to do when I do the subtractive style. I should probably experiment with that a little bit. Just going to grab a clean brush, another one of those shop brushes there. I'm just going to kind of blend this out a little bit. So you saw I gave myself a very big, loose shape to start with. Kind of, you can almost see kind of some of the drawing a little bit. Got a little more dark in a couple areas. I am noticing my surface is a little slicker than I want, meaning I added a little more paint thinner than I would prefer. It's going to be a touch slippery. But you guys beginning to kind of see some of the shapes that I'm going to be chasing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
All right, now comes the fun part. Now we're going to basically use our paper towels almost as painting tools or as carving tools or whatever your brain, way of thinking is. I still want a little more dark. All right, So I'm going to use my paper towel basically as a carving tool, and I'm going to come out and remove my lightest areas. And I'm using my reference very loosely. I'm going to cut down a couple trees. I'm going to move a couple trees. And I can change the pressure with my paper towel just like I do with my brush to make some nice and interesting, and I can roll that paper towel and it just makes some nice organic, unpredictable shapes. I love this little burst of stuff up here, but it's not going to quite work. So let's see if I can. The truth is I can take that up so you guys can see the reference, even though it'll probably make it less impressive because it's not going to end up looking like the reference. I doubt. But truthfully, this is one of my great joys in painting, is this process, this removal process. I almost want to like just figure out a way to make a whole bunch of paintings where it's almost just this, because I just enjoy it so much. It didn't really help. You can't see it because of the glare, but I can see it. You can twist your paper towel, make little tiny carving shapes. You can put your finger behind it and make.
Is 3 colors about the maximum you'd use with a subtractive method like this?
I mean,
Given that you layer?
1 or 2 is better. I just have been experimenting long enough. I mean, my red doesn't look like red. My blue does not look like blue. It looks kind of like just a darker color. So I know that I'm making basically a warm brown. And then wherever my ultramarine gets in there stronger, makes a darker color. So experiment, but you could start with literally just ultramarine blue. Payne's gray is also a nice way to do it. You get this kind of nice, just a black and white basically underpainting. It's kind of nice. Carve out like a little bit of lights coming across some of these grasses. But yeah, and you actually, for the underpainting, the truth is you don't need to use transparent colors. You can do it with opaque colors. A lot of artists do, in fact, that do this style of painting will use more opaque color. I just like the transparency because as I continue to wipe away, watch what happens. It will hopefully. Oh, and I got a reference for my clouds as well, for my background. So I'm not going to be putting a bright blue background like is in this. I'm going to be using something a little more sunsetty, just so it's not like the other one that I just did. So I know that my sun, I'm going to probably put it here so that I can reflect it into my water a little bit, so I can maybe even just put that in as a marker. And then from there, I can begin to lighten my sky out accordingly. But isn't that interesting how even just with this very limited amount, it already begins to look kind of like an old world, almost tonalist painting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He says begging for adulation, adulation.
It's beautiful.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I do love doing this. And I think,
Looks like Mount Vesuvius.
yeah, a lot of people will be like, yeah, it looks like a volcano or a fire or other things. And that's why you can do it with cooler colors. There's a lot of times when I go out, when I'm painting in plein air, that I will actually use kind of purples, like a cool purple, like ultramarine with just a touch of the quinacridone. Makes a really nice underpainting color. Purple seems to go really well with most things in nature. Plays really beautifully off greens and makes these nice transition colors.
Out here in the desert, there's a time at sunset and at dawn that, I don't know, as the light bends over the horizon, everything looks kind of pale purple.
Ooh, yeah. And I bet the pale purple would play so beautifully off the ochres, and the oranges would just look magic.
Ooh, stunning.
Yeah, so experiment, you guys. If this is something you're interested in doing, you know, the subtractive way to kind of start. This is a little bit wet right now to actually come in and start painting where it's thicker. It'll be a little bit slippery just because I added a little bit too much paint thinner, I think. But if I gave it 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, it would start to tack up. The paint thinner definitely kind of flashes out pretty quickly. I'm just kind of thinning out my areas around where, you know, maybe I want it to feel more like leaves. So it's not just solid and dark. And let's grab clean color. And here's something I can do is I can take my paper towel, squeeze out a little area, and I can actually add a little bit of paint thinner to it. And now I'm going to make one area even brighter. All right, so you can really get in there and play and have a good time. Now it's almost getting back to my fluorescent board surface. Again, I apologize for putting my arms in front of the camera and taking away the focus. I need to figure out how to do the fixed focus, which unfortunately this little digital camera does not seem capable of, as far as I can tell.
Michael, did you say this is going to be your underpainting, or is this going to be the real deal?
I mean, it can go either way. Oftentimes, most of the time, it's my underpainting, but sometimes I like them enough that they end up staying. And I've got some areas where there's a little more paint that I don't want, so I can actually, you know, use the paint that's there a little bit to paint. Especially I've got some dark spots that maybe I need to make them a little more unified. But yeah, I mean, if you love it, then you can leave it. If you don't love it, good news, it's an underpainting. You know, it gives you a couple of chances to be happy with it. But no, I usually am intending to use it as an underpainting. It's just I don't, how long have I been painting on this? About 15, 20 minutes. And I've got it all covered. I've got a lot of my decisions made. I do this style in my design and composition class quite a bit. And also then we were doing it in the tonalist class that just finished up. And it's just a great, very fast way, because the truth is, if I don't like it, a little bit of paint thinner on my towel, and I'm back to just starting again. It's really nice. It's very non-committal. And it keeps my brain thinking abstractly. It's thinking big shapes. It's thinking flow, movement, and design. It's thinking big values, keeping my values pretty simplistic. This way of painting really works with my brain. And I've said this 100 times, I'm always so curious if I like it so much because of being, partly dyslexic. And then, it's interesting to me how many students who will also, tell me, I'm also dyslexic. And I also love doing this because it's a reverse way of painting. I don't know. So for some students, they will literally, thank me and tell me this is amazing. And for others of you, especially you acrylic painters, this way is pretty difficult. In fact, almost impossible with acrylics. But that's all right. I'll show you in a future class different ways of kind of doing something a little bit similar.
I can see how I could use that method, but the strategy would have to be different. I wouldn't be able to just be able to play with the entire painting at once. It would have to be like in sections, or areas.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, and what I do when I do acrylics is if I'm going to do an underpainting, I'll just pick like a burnt umber and white and maybe ultramarine blue. And instead of doing wiping away, I'm just adding my white because it's almost just as fast, right? It's drying so quickly that I can just do a very limited value and color underpainting with my acrylics really quick. I'm trying to see if I have any of those laying around. I don't. I think I showed you guys one last week. So this one was done just using black and white acrylic underpainting, and then I just glazed into it with the quinacridone red.
Yeah.
So get the values. And so I'll show you guys that in a future class because there's other students that really enjoy doing that. And it really helps to kind of modify and simplify some of our later decision making. There's sometimes, painting is so much, right? We're dealing with color, we're dealing with temperature, we're dealing with shapes, we're dealing with values, we're dealing with perspective, all the different elements, edge quality, all the things that go together to make a painting. Sometimes by dissecting it and working on it in pieces, like right now I'm working on my design and my values, I'm getting some nice colors, but that's almost secondary. And so the same thing if I do an acrylic black and white underpainting, I'm making a lot of my heavy lifting, hard decisions, and then I just get to come back in and almost just play with color on top. Same thing I could do here. Sometimes if I have like a spindly trunk, let's give it here. I can almost just come back in and chop out where the trunk is going to be. And let's hope you can see that, what I'm going to do here is I will take just a clean brush, a thin brush, and I can pick up some of the darks that are there, or I can, come over here. Need enough to give the brush some shape. And then I can I'm going to bring and paint a a trunk in there that's not there. Can't really see that, can you?
So Michael, I'm seeing that it seems to me that the values in your reference material are very different than the ones you've actually created in the underpainting. Is that true?
A little bit, but not too much. Let's see, I'll try comparing it and see why you say so. If you're just looking at the lights and the darks, squint your eyes. So which parts are different, do you think? Is it?
It seems that you've expanded the values, like in the foreground a lot.
Yeah,
The range, and then the tree on the right, it seems like, again, different.
yeah, I mean, that is probably true. And that's partly just whatever colors were underneath there. But I did kind of come through. I want a little more interest than just, darkness. I don't want just that. So I know that the tops of the grasses would be getting a little bit of radiant light, Again, we as humans, we just generally see a little better than the camera. The camera in this instance was focused on the lights. I got those bright clouds in there. So that means that the darks usually will get darkened quite a bit. If I focused my camera into the shadows, which I probably did if I go back and look through all my photos, so I generally will. If I'm really happy with a scene I'm photographing, I will generally photograph into the lights, meaning I'll touch my iPhone screen and tell it to focus on the sky. And then I will touch it into the shadows and tell it to focus into the shadows. And then I'll touch into a mid value area somewhere and tell it to look there. If I were thinking I wanted to kind of call this painting, finish it up in this, I can always take handy dandy Q-tips. And I can use those, like if I wanted to get the light hitting on the sides of these trunks, I can. You can also use Q-tips for sky holes when you're doing subtractive painting. Let's just pretend I want a little more, some sky holes up here. Or down in these trees here. And the cool thing, just like in the last time when I was doing the sky holes to leaves connection here, eventually I will pick up enough paint that I can use that paint to paint leaves back on. All right, just a couple more highlights here. Just gonna kind of look into the reflections a little bit. So you could spend as much time refining this. A lot of times it's just much, much looser than this. I don't care about all the little lights on the trunks and the sky holes and everything else, because I know I'm going to come back in and paint over the top of this. But a lot of times this is just a nice sketch. Like I said, I want to pretend that I've got to paint some clouds in. So I need to kind of come back in and get a little bit of some darks a little bit here. So let's. Dry brush, you kind of soften those up. So this is just something for you to experiment with. Again, some of you are really gonna like it. It may change, you know, how you paint and how you start paintings and approach paintings. For other of you, you may try it once, twice, and just, you know, swear at me under your breath the entire time. I get it. But it's just another tool. Again, that's a large part of my painting, is trying to just give you interesting tools to better convey what it is you know, whatever that poetry is inside of you that you want to get out. Just sometimes having some slightly different tools really helps. Paper towel. And let's grab another Q-tip, and I'm going to be about done with this one, and we'll get to the third painting, more opaque. I'm going to dip this Q-tip in a little bit of paint thinner, and I'm going to get most of that paint thinner off over here. I'm just kind of pushing it against this board, and what I will do is I can bring back some brightness in those clouds if I want to. And again, I don't want just all the shape of Q-tips, so I'll take another Q-tip and just kind of mess that up a little bit, so it's not just, you know, little worm holes, shapes repeatedly. Or I could take my paper towel, or I could take a brush, or whatever it is. I just want to make sure I don't have the same silly little shape over and over and over, or mark. Repetition is somewhat useful. You want some repetition, but truly diversity in shapes, values, forms, temperatures is kind of the spice of life and makes your paintings come to life. And it's a happy medium somewhere, trying to figure that out all the time in our paintings.
Will you be filling in the color when this dries in another?
Yeah, I'll step back and I'll look at it, and yeah, I mean, so the truth is I could start painting on it now if I wanted to.
But I mean, will that be part of the class like next week or something though? Will you show us how you've now? I mean, will you paint over this for a class exercise?
Who's asking?
Karen Gatens.
For you, I will. Yes, I'd be happy to do that. And that's actually I think that's good. Good idea. Thank you. And maybe I'll try to, in between now and then, get another one kind of prepped as well, so we can do two of them. So that will be, so next week we will start, I will show you painting from transparent to opaque and doing a combination in two settings if you ever are interested in letting your paintings dry in between. Sometimes it really works, and there's some effects like scumbling and glazing that we simply can't do otherwise. That is one of the hardest parts about teaching workshops in person, is that I don't have time to let a painting dry. That's one of the reasons I like doing the black and white with acrylic, because you can still glaze into it. Cloud's a little intense, so. All right, well, there we go. It's an underpainting, a crazy glowy forest fire of a tonalist painting. This tree shape is really odd. Didn't really notice how crazy that got when I went in and carved out everything, so maybe
I'd be satisfied with this as a painting.
there you go. Yeah, sometimes they are. There are some of these that I've left to that. I have one up here that I did not long ago. I think I may have shared this, but I ended up, it was with purple, or with quinacridone red, and I gotta move this back. Quinacridone red and Payne's gray. over kind of a yellowy, kind of a taupe colored thing. Unfortunately, I sprayed it with a little bit of paint thinner, so that became fireflies. But I like that. I don't know what to do with it now. It's kind of an in-between painting, living in purgatory, but yeah, there's some where I just kind of like the under sketch enough, but also that kind of gets me in trouble. So this one that I did previously is almost like that, and then because this is the undercolor, but then I added a little bit of gray, just scumbled in a little bit of gray after it was dry, just to make the warm a little warmer. I brought a little bit of that gray down into the grasses, and I'm actually I've already submitted it to a show, but I actually contemplating, probably should have come back in and added some kind of olivey green on top of those grasses. I think would have been really nice. So maybe this is my second chance at redemption, and maybe that's what I'll do. Painting, painting, painting.
Do you paint the same scenes often?
If I have more to think about and more to say. Yeah, and then there's certain areas that I paint all the time just because they're close and they're easy for me, and so it's not such a big commitment. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the video and take a little break.